So War Tycoon recently has really been adding a lot of different types of vehicles which have caused the tanks in the game as of now, or even any ground vehicle, to actually be a lot less usable. And in this video, guys, I will be covering a current problem which I do see going on into War Tycoon that is currently making the likes of the ground vehicles, but even tanks, not as much usable in this current meta, which is a bit of a shame because after the brand new map came out, things have really gotten harder for the ground users. So I will be talking about a few points and the most important things that I would like to actually get off my chest today. And I know that most of you guys will probably be agreeing because I have spoken to actually a few fellow content creators which are currently trying to record a video on the brand new Nighthawk, on how powerful it actually is, but they barely can go ahead and test it because almost no one is going to be using tanks. And let me go ahead and explain you guys why most people do not use tanks as of this current meta and as of how things are going right now. So as you guys know, the map has been recently updated, and unfortunately enough for the tank users has been made bigger. And this does very much heavily benefit the likes of the plane players because it gives them a lot more escape from ground vehicles and actually allows them to be able to counter them better because it can simply get further away. However, on the other side, the tanks, if they want to go ahead and raid a base, because the tanks are actually still an offensive vehicle in this game, but they are not really treated like one because of the fact that if you guys want to go ahead and actually raid someone's base, most of the time the tanks are simply not going to be the way because they are not going to be fast enough. So the first change I would actually like to see, hopefully if the developers are going to be rebalancing tanks as time goes on and even any vehicle in the game, I would like the tanks to be able to go at faster speed. For example, the Abrams X maybe 55 miles per hour, maybe the Terminator like 60, then all the tanks are going 40 or 45, could go up to like 50 or something. I think this could work very well to actually make the tanks a lot easier in terms of going to traveling to different bases, because again, bigger map, but there hasn't been really a buff to tanks, but it has been a buff to planes. The next thing which I would like to talk about is going to be the fact that currently the tanks or any other ground vehicles do not really have much counter to planes, because the planes can simply pretty much just destroy any tank with missile spam, and that's one of the problems which I have been seeing in the game as of recently because of the vehicles like the Su-57 being added into the game, which pretty much just counter any tank in the game, which is incredibly annoying. And the thing that I do actually find very fascinating is the fact that parts on tanks take a lot longer to actually go ahead and spawn, meaning that tanks cannot be spammed as much. So pretty much you guys are going to be able to have better firepower for a cost of less parts, which is actually pretty much a very big problem which I noticed in the game, because for tanks be able to actually use such a vehicle, you guys really gotta wait for a long time, because the previous tank balancing of making it actually wait a lot longer for parts, it was actually balanced because tanks back then were very balanced with planes, if not were able to somewhat counter them. The next thing which I would like to also go ahead and mention is the fact that tanks on average are always going to be taking a lot more skill than to planes in terms of being able to destroy one another. For example, the tank player has to hit a shot from very far stats, at least 2000 if a plane is going to be abusing its lock-on range, because the plane can go ahead and just destroy a tank at range, and the tank can pretty much not do anything against it because of sneak attacks and etc. And this is where things actually go into a very cool perspective. I would like to talk about another thing which I believe the tanks will be cool to actually go ahead and have, is the fact that since we do not have an APS system, I wish that the tanks should be able to deploy the smoke a lot longer. Let's say I think the cooldown of the smoke should be at least 2 times less, and then the smoke would of course also last a less amount of time, because it would give the tank players to actually have a lot more openings. Because for example, if I use smoke right now and just stay in here, it's not really gonna work this much either, because you guys are going to be a standing still target and planes can still shoot missiles at you and they will do pretty much almost the same damage no matter what. And just overall making the smoke be much more deployable for tanks would allow the tank players to play a lot more reactively against the plane players, because right now there isn't really any advantages except you guys have a heavy cannon shell, but if somebody just knows how to play around it, you guys are pretty much going to be done, and I really haven't seen these vehicles be used in the recent meta just as much. Another thing which I want to talk about is that recently there has been a lot of vehicles that have been made and added into the game, such as the Su-25 Frogfoot, the Nighthawk, the B2 Spirit, Su-57. All of these vehicles are perfect counters to tanks which just have been added to the game. However, on the other side, the tanks really haven't received a buff or anything like that whatsoever, but there has also been no other tanks that were able to also counter these vehicles except the ADAS. But the ADAS is very weak and nobody almost uses it. So realistically, these vehicles have really not been used, and even if War Tycoon developers would like to go ahead and check, they could even see on their statistics that of course planes are going to be used a lot more on average than the tanks. Anyway guys, that is all I have for you all in today's video. I hope that that speak the community's mind in at least a very good way for the developers to also understand. Kismo, if you're watching this video, I very much appreciate it. I hope that some changes can be made, because it would be very good to have the tanks kind of back in the meta. Anyway, I'll see you guys next video. Have a great rest of the day, and thanks so much to all my channel members.